Themes in American History Project by Casey Hunt, Cassandra Plisinski, and Tegan Pratt. Our theme is, in the search to establish itself as a world power, American foreign policy shifts from being malicious and self-serving to protecting itself and other powers. The Indian Removal Act and resulting Trail of Tears under Andrew Jackson shows that in the beginning stages of America's growth as a power, its foreign policy was self-serving and malevolent. Racism and bias towards Native Americans had been prevalent since the formation of the colonies, displaying itself through early disputes and through assimilation efforts beginning as soon as George Washington's presidency. Preceding the Indian Removal Act and the Trail of Tears, encounters like Tecumseh's Rebellion and the Creek War had made Americans wary of Native Americans. The U.S. government wanted to exploit the resources of the lands these people inhabited, moving them to demand land cessions from the tribes or else. Warfare with tribes as a result of encroachment was also understandably quite common. Aaron Cherry. These conflicts led President Andrew Jackson, elected in 1828, to the belief that removing Native American tribes to remote land would prevent conflict. Action began with developing the Indian Removal Act. He initiated with the idea of negotiating while being benevolent. Monetary compensation would be offered to tribes living east of the Mississippi to move to reserved land. While addressing Congress in the beginning stages, he said, "It will be my sincere and constant desire to observe toward the Indian tribes within our limits a just and liberal policy, and to give that humane and considerate attention to their rights and wants which is consistent with the habits of our government and the feelings of our people." However, these actions were not consistent with the American values of property ownership or equality. This act additionally broke many treaties that the U.S. government had made with certain tribes that were to make their land protected. These include the Pickering Treaty, the Treaty with the Potawatomi, and the Treaty of Holston. The Treaty of Holston was signed in 1791. This was never signed by Congress, but representatives of the government, making it easy to bypass. However, Cherokee representatives agreed to these terms, so it was thought that this agreement would be honored. Article 1 of this treaty states that there shall be perpetual peace and friendship between all the citizens of the United States of America and all the individuals composing the whole Cherokee Nation of Indians. Article 8 in this treaty states that if any citizen of the United States or other person not being an Indian shall settle on any of the Cherokees' lands, such persons shall forfeit the protection of the United States, and the Cherokees may punish him or not as they please. Based on this treaty, the Cherokee were to have the rights of their land and enjoy perpetual peace between them and the United States government. These promises would later be broken. In defense from removal, in 1838, the Cherokee applied to the Supreme Court. They sued the state in Georgia versus Worcester and won. The verdict was that the Cherokee were to be considered a sovereign nation, therefore they could not be controlled by the U.S. government. Though John Marshall insisted Andrew Jackson honor the Supreme Court's decision, Jackson resisted and marched the Cherokee to what is now Oklahoma. They were forced out of their home east of the Mississippi to barren lands by 7,000 federal and state troops. Cherokees were forced from their homes at gunpoint and imprisoned until removal could take place. Some would migrate by boat, others would walk or ride 800 miles through 5 states. The travel from their homeland to a new strange territory would become known as the Trail of Tears. Many made the journey on foot, horseback, or in ill-protecting wagons. An entry from a letter written by a supervising soldier describes the destitute situation. The sufferings of the Cherokees were awful. The trail of exiles was a trail of death. They had to sleep in wagons and on the ground without fire. I have known as many as 22 of them to die in one night of pneumonia, ill treatment, cold, and exposure. John G. Burnett. Because of the Indian Removal Act, 15,000 Cherokees were displaced from their homelands and forced to a new and strange place, with 4,000 casualties. This is only the story of one nation affected by the Indian Removal Act. After legal confirmation that removal was unjust, the Cherokee were forced to leave their ancestral land, leading to great tragedy. Despite treaties, despite the Supreme Court, and despite humanity, Native peoples were expelled from their lands. The actions of the U.S. government against the Cherokee Nation surrounding the Indian Removal Act and the Trail of Tears displays the malicious intent of America during early times of foreign policy.
American foreign policy regarding the annexation of the Philippines was morally unjust and malicious, fueled by American military and economic desire.
In 1898, an American naval warship exploded in Havana Harbor, Cuba, a Spanish territory, killing 266 officers and men on board the ship. Although the cause of the tragedy was likely the ammunition supplies on the ship initiating the explosion, through yellow journalism, journalists such as William Randolph Hearst and Joseph Pulitzer convinced Americans that because America was in support of Cuban independence, Cuba at the time being a Spanish colony, Spain planted the bombs in the USS Maine. By April, the United States declared war on Spain over outrage of the explosion of the USS Maine. The Spanish-American War had two underlying causes: the explosion of the USS Maine and America's support for Filipino and Cuban independence from Spanish rule. This fight for Filipino independence portrayed American imperialism as having favorable intentions. However, eventually military and economic greed overcame American imperialism, especially in the Philippines. American naval commander George Dewey led a squadron into Manila Bay in the Philippines to destroy the Spanish warships stationed there. Emilio Aguinaldo, a Filipino revolutionary, originally believed the United States was on his side, and therefore staged a revolution against the Spanish, aiding the United States in what Aguinaldo believed to be a fight for the Philippines' independence. Aguinaldo stated, "Divine Providence is about to place independence within our reach. The Americans, not for mercenary motives, but for the sake of humanity and the lamentations of so many persecuted people, have considered it opportune to extend their protecting mantle to our beloved country. There, where you see the American flag flying, assemble in number. They are our redeemers." However, Americans proved not to be the saviors Aguinaldo originally believed. Once the United States soldiers seized the Filipino capital from the Spanish, they ordered Aguinaldo and his men to wait outside the city. Although, once the Spanish surrendered, the American commander refused to recognize Aguinaldo's rebel movement or allow them into the city. This was where the hostility and tensions rose between the Filipinos and the U.S., as the Filipinos realized they were not fighting for their liberation, but to be under the rule of a new country, the United States. Soon after, the American victories in El Caney, San Juan Heights, and Santiago led to an agreement between the United States and Spain on August 12, 1898, to cease fire. With a peace treaty in the making, the United States had to make a decision regarding its newly acquired land, including Guam, Puerto Rico, and the Philippines. Annexing the Philippines meant the United States would contradict its long-standing principle of freedom, instead of granting the Philippines their well-deserved liberation. Despite this, those in favor of American imperialism saw the Philippines as great opportunity for economic and military growth. American goods would have a large new market, China. Furthermore, a driving belief among those in favor of annexation was Anglo-Saxonism, the idea that it was the white man's duty to civilize and Christianize savage races such as the Filipinos. Harper's Weekly, an American political magazine based in New York City, illustrated the mentality of Anglo-Saxonism, stating, "The Filipino is the true child of the East. His moral fiber is as flimsy as the web of pineapple gauze of which the women make their dresses. He will cheat, steal, and lie beyond orthodox limit of the Anglo-Saxon. His unreliability and the persistency which he disobeys orders are irritating beyond description. Besides this, his small stature and color invite abuse." Ultimately, President William McKinley chose to annex the Philippines, and with his decision, the United States established itself as an imperial world power. Regarding his decision, President McKinley explained, "One night late it came to me this way. I don't know how it was, but it came. That we could not give them back to Spain. That would be cowardly and dishonorable. That we could not turn them over to France and Germany, our commercial rivals in the Orient. That would be bad business and discreditable. That we could not leave them to themselves. They are unfit for self-government, and they would soon have anarchy and misrule over there worse than Spain's was. And that there was nothing left for us to do but to take them all and to educate the Filipinos and uplift and civilize and Christianize them, and by God's grace do the very best we could by them, as our fellow men for whom Christ also died." Regarding the United States' decision to annex the Philippines, Emilio Aguinaldo stated the decision was a violent and aggressive seizure. Aguinaldo ordered his men, or guerrillas, to attack American soldiers in the Philippines. To fight this resistance, American General MacArthur instituted concentration camps in the Philippines where thousands of Filipinos died of starvation and disease. The horrors of American military force continued throughout the Philippines. General Jake Smith, in command of Samar, the third largest island in the Philippines, ordered a mass slaughter of Filipinos, ordering his men to kill anything over 10. Furthermore, Major J. Franklin Bell, in command of Batangas, a province in the Philippines, made his malicious intentions clear, stating, "All consideration and regard for the inhabitants of this place cease from the day I become commander. I have the force and authority to do whatever seems to me good, and especially to humiliate all those in this province who have any pride." On December 8, 1901, Bell also began setting up concentration camps. Bell gave the people of Batangas 2 weeks to move into the camps. Any property outside the camps was either confiscated by the United States Army or destroyed. Anyone found outside the camps was immediately shot. The camp's lack of food and crowded conditions led to diseases such as malaria and dung fever uncontrollably spreading. Peony Culture states a correspondent described the prisoners as a miserable-looking lot of little brown rats, utterly spiritless. These concentration camps were also much too small to fit the surplus of Filipinos living there. One concentration camp was 2 miles by 1 mile in area, yet home to 8,000 Filipinos. Some concentration camps killed up to 20% of their population. In a letter Major J. Franklin Bell issued to American soldiers stationed in the Philippines, Bell stated, "Arrest anyone believed to be guilty of giving aid or assistance to the insurrection in any way, or giving food or comfort to the enemies of the government. It is not necessary to wait for sufficient evidence to lead to conviction by a court." A United States soldier in the Philippines described in a letter he wrote to Senator Hoar the horrifying methods used by American troops against Filipino civilians. He states, "At any time I am liable to be called upon to go out and bind and gag helpless prisoners, to strike them in the face, to knock them down when so bound, to bear them away from wife and children at their very door, who are shrieking pitifully all the while, or kneeling and kissing the hands of our officers, see from those who seem not to know what it is, and then with a crowd of soldiers holding our helpless victim head downward in a tub of water in his own yard, or bind him hand and foot, attaching ropes to head and feet, and then lowering him into the depths of a well of water till life is well nigh choked out, and the bitterness of death is tasted, and our poor gasping victims ask us for the poor boon of being finished off in mercy to themselves." All these things have been done at one time or another by our men, generally in cases of trying to obtain information as to the location of arms and ammunition. Nor can it be said that there is any general repulsion on the part of the enlisted men to taking part in these doings. I regret to have to say that, on the contrary, the majority of soldiers take a keen delight in them, and rush to joy to the making of this latest development of a Roman holiday. The amount of innocent Filipinos massacred by the United States Army displays the malicious actions of the United States foreign policy during the annexation of the Philippines. Filipino historian E. San Juan Jr. believes the amount of death as a result of the United States Army constitutes a mass genocide by the United States. According to the World Future Fund, in the 15 years that followed the defeat of the Spanish in Malaya Bay in 1989, more Filipinos were killed by U.S. forces than by the Spanish in 300 years of colonization. Over 1.5 million died out of a population of 6 million. I interviewed Dora Sperling-Hieri, who is Filipino and lived in the Philippines for more than half of her life before moving to America. I asked her about her opinion on the relationship between the Philippines and the United States today, and she stated,
Filipinos, there is lots of people in every society, I think. The American acts do not represent most of the American people. Not all Filipinos agreed with the Civil War, raised by the rebels, and the end of it. Actually, you need to freedom and independence. Living in America, I see the Americans don't hold any British people today, but controlled American before. It's our independence. So I think it doesn't affect.
Overall, in the United States' first great action establishing itself as a world power, the U.S. unjustly killed thousands, holding them subject to starvation and torture with little to no reason. This brutality without cause demonstrates the malicious actions of the United States. The United States' underlying motivation for annexation was purely out of greed, justified in citizens' minds by the mentality of Anglo-Saxonism.
America's latest foreign affair is occurring as you watch this video.
As far as North Korea is concerned, I know that we'll have eventually success. North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury.
지 못합니다. 미국 본토 전역이 우리의 핵 타격 사정권 안에 있으며 핵 단추가 내 사무실 책상 위에 항상 놓여 있다는 것. 이는 결코 위협이 아닌 현실임을 똑바로 알아야 합니다.
When I say to the North, do not underestimate us and do not try us.
With the media grasping at every hint of drama that the feud has to offer, it can be difficult to understand what's really happening between the United States and North Korea. Putting aside all drama, however, the United States' concern about North Korea stems from the need to protect the country from destruction and danger. To better understand North Korea, we must go back in time to see their journey up until today. North Korea's separation from the South occurred through the Korean War. This also started the hostility that remains up to today, since the U.S. sided with the South.
My uncle, so my father's brother, was actually in the Korean War. He's a Korean War veteran. So I grew up knowing that we were at war with Korea, and I always felt there was a little bit of tension between our two countries.
Decades after this separation, disaster struck. The North Korean famine lasted from 1994 to 1998. The previously isolated country was now forced to ask for an international food aid. The powerful government has essentially been run by the Kim Jong reign since the nation's beginning. Kim Jong-il passed away in 2011. This passed the leadership to his son, Kim Jong-un. Since assuming power, Kim has slowly become an internationally recognized figure. His character is often culturally referred to with the mention of Donald J. Trump, elected in 2016 and sworn into office in 2017.
Professionals need to operate professionally, and they need to be allowed to operate professionally.
It seems like our own president is trying to throw us into war with his unprofessional toned tweets. This is especially true in an already dangerous situation with North Korea.
I think his tweets are a little bit childish, something that many people do every day, but the president probably shouldn't be doing. I do think he's trying to make the relationship with that country better, but he's not going about it the right way.
Government officials all do what they do because they are passionate about the citizens and, most importantly, their safety. America is in a place it has been before, safe in a quiet bubble as foreign affairs rage on around us. The media as a peephole into the rest of the world. This, through time, has proven to be America's latest strategy with coping with foreign affairs. Understanding the importance of being involved, but overall putting American first.
Trump seems to be a little bit more stirring the pot, and we'll see how it all turns out. I think there's been a lot of acts of aggression from Korea that have led to this situation, but hopefully it resolves itself in a way that's beneficial for the country.
To this, those in power and those living under it pledge allegiance to protecting the people first.